everyone, and welcome to Elsevier Spotlight Podcast series. In these sessions, I've been talking to a lot of the movers and shakers from within Elsevier and beyond within the wider publishing industry to hear about their experiences of 2020 and how they've been responding to the challenges of COVID-19. Today, I have a very special guest. I have Ruth Jones, who's the Director for Global Sales at Ingram's Digital Services. And we're very excited to hear from Ruth because she has a huge amount of experience working with partners all over the world, not just publishers, but booksellers, distributors, wholesalers, helping them with their digital responses under normal conditions. And this year, of course, there's been an added focus there. So welcome, Ruth.
Thanks, Fiona. Nice to be here.
Where are you actually calling us from today?
This is my home office based in leafy Surrey in the UK. Ingram is headquartered out of Nashville, Tennessee, travel being curtailed. I do typically work from home. So for me, all the changes have been just a slight difference of where everyone else is. So hence it looks like a shed because that's what it is. It's in my garden. It's a little cozy office.
I was going to say, I'm sure it's heated.
It is, yes. Yes, it has to be.
So from your perspective, your day-to-day work hasn't necessarily been changed in terms of what you do when you're based in the UK, but obviously any travel that you would normally be doing, that's totally curtailed and you're not seeing a lot of your customers face to face. What other sorts of challenges have you seen across Ingram with your customers or with your colleagues as the pandemic has spread around the world and lockdowns being implemented in different countries?
Well, as a global company, the decisions had to be made globally, but it's not the same situation everywhere. Ingram was very quick and I think right to send everyone home that could work from home and made investments in the right equipment, etc. And we have had some return to office in some areas, not fully, like a very small percentage, but for some people, going to work in a home office isn't the ideal that it could be. You have younger people perhaps living at home. They don't need to work at the kitchen surface and have everyone walking by. And so we've, as a global organization, we've made it as safe as it can possibly be for people. And of course, for those that work in our warehouses, our print on demand facilities, very early on, those were given heightened security, heightened cleanliness, and that's allowed us to stay open globally. And we've had very few instances where we needed to shut down and to restart. So we responded quite quickly. Travel was curtailed well before any travel restrictions were put in by any governments. From my perspective, actually, it's accelerated the move to online discussions and working with global teams. It means that I'm no longer working with my colleagues all sat in a room and I'm on the picture frame, if you like, the video that's looking in. So in many ways, it's leveled off our communications.
Yes, we've seen that too.
It's great. And I think particularly when you have a US-based company needing to take account of international, it's made everyone much more aware of each other, from my perspective. But it's also led to people learning new skills, as the platforms themselves developed.
Yeah.
Our new favorite is raising the hand within a Teams meeting. There are other providers. Just stopping people talking over each other and learning to listen. We've now got the non-verbal feedback. We can see people in multiple grids and learning to be respectful, and not that we were disrespectful, but you can't have the hoi polloi of a meeting with people getting up and getting down. And that, I think that's been a learning curve for some. Other things are, have come out. It means that we really focused on our business cadence of reporting, writing things down, because there are no corridor conversations now.
Yeah.
And that's really, and that's advice, I think, I've seen it written down and pushed out by people like McKinsey of, in a crisis, you have to over communicate, be very clear. Ingram has always been a very well organized, long-standing company, but I think putting in these new protocols, it really helped us. It's not reporting for reporting's sake, but it's actually a more broadcast approach.
Yeah.
That's been good.
I think we'll come back to that topic about that face-to-face communication, because that's one of the things we're losing with Frankfurt being cancelled this year. But what I wanted to perhaps touch upon first was around your role with the digital services division at Ingram, because surely this year of all years, you've seen a huge amount of change, a lot more customers wanting to expand what they're doing, or even a lot of new customers coming who maybe don't know what options there are available to them. So you, in my mind, would have that insight of how much change and appetite there has been for the digital services to support the book selling industry.
It's been huge. And so where to start? I'll start with the more general and then get into the more specific. I don't think I'll be surprising anyone by this, but huge shift to online selling and online buying. Let's talk about the consumers. Consumers shift to online. People are online all day. Significant in some of the data that we've seen in terms of people's purchasing habits. We've been seeing a very strong shift towards smartphones and mobile devices. That's not surprising either. But actually, during the pandemic, a rise in ordering using laptops.
Yeah. PC. And by buying books, we mean not just electronic books, but also print books, because that didn't fall away. You talk about both of those product media.
So increased online purchasing, and then decisions made about print or digital at that point. So yes, ebook sales are up, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But in terms of that broader spectrum, fulfilling orders on a global basis is what Ingram does. So either it's from existing stock in a wholesale sense, or it might actually be print on demand. And we've seen that happen very, very strongly. A strong move where publishers have put their titles into print on demand because of the disruptions to the supply chain.
Yeah.
If you lock your books up in a warehouse and it then has to close for whatever reason, we can step in, and we've seen that significantly. I
guess I should also clarify for those who might be watching this, is that Ingram handles not just STM. So whilst we might be talking right now to a lot of our booksellers who specialize in science, health sciences, particularly in medicine, you handle a lot of trade as well. So you're talking very generally here about that uptake in ebooks and stuff. So a lot of that, I'm guessing you don't have that granularity of insight as to what you've seen in terms of academic selling as opposed to trade publishing.
I can do a broad brush for you, absolutely, if you like.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
So in terms of ebooks, the shift for academic titles, I think there had been a decline going on, particularly in monographs, for the last 12, 18 months in any case for print. Mm-hmm. But we have seen a huge shift of library budgets moving to E, because there needs to be provision to their patrons.
Okay.
And their patrons are all at home like us, online. Yes. You cannot lend a book through the post. Let's just leave it at that. You know, that is hard to do. And so we have seen a shift of that budget. And we've also seen a shift of purchasing by those institutions into more inclusive models. And that's a global trend, because you cannot have students locked out. And before, when you were reliant on some students being in dorms or other facilities logging on at different times, and so you didn't need to worry about concurrent access. Now everyone is hopefully not locked down, but certainly online learning to over 50% of their time, wanting to access their content. And the same is true of professors, researchers, etc. So, you know, in an institutional setting, there's a much higher demand being placed on the university systems, the institutional systems.
Okay.
And so with that in mind, that shift, the organizations are having to look to how they increase the access to the content that they have purchased, and a shifting budget to do so. So we are seeing that shift. That shift is actually, if you're thinking outside STM, and it isn't always outside. So even if you think of a consumer site, we see strong sell-through. Anecdotally, we've been analyzing the last 3 years of data, so not pandemic data specifically in this example, and we see very strong sales through Amazon of titles priced $20 and above. That's not trade. That is business, enterprise, learning materials, It may not be extreme nanotechnology or something like that, but it might be, and we haven't dug in. So just to give you a sense of that.
Okay.
And I'd also say that the assumption that the consumers, I'm going to use the word consumer, the consumers of high-level technical information are in some way constrained to purchasing or accessing through their normal work routes is not true, has never really been true. Google Scholar proved that, but is now definitely not true. And we're seeing a real veracity to access content, hopefully legally, and also to push the purchasing. So I think the difference here is who's making the purchasing decision, or who is putting the money into the system. Are they buying on an institutional budget, or are they buying on an individual researcher budget, or are they indeed subscribing as a student and not expecting their institution to step up? And there are so many use cases in this.
It's very interesting to hear that insight about that B2B model. A lot of our customers would also, they might be operating on a smaller level. And I'm sure that you have a lot of customers and people that you're working with who are working on that, who have smaller operations, small bookstores and the like. And I'm sure you've seen people attempting to move into that digital space, because that face-to-face selling has disappeared this year, whether that was at a congress or at a temporary sort of exhibit booth, or in the bookstore scenario has completely disappeared this year. So a lot of people have pivoted to having that digital space. What sort of trends have you seen there? Have you been supporting a lot of customers who've wanted to build out more of a digital book selling experience for their customers? Yes,
we have. On the supply side, absolutely. Ingram is always the largest book wholesaler in the world. We have over 40,000 accounts, and we work through other partners as well. So Ingram supplies globally. It's not just a US-centric organization. In terms of our indie, or not the large behemoths, yes, we have seen a big shift to integrating with us. Bookshop.org is an organization in the US, and we are the fulfillment partner for them. So smaller, not necessarily very small, but smaller independent stores working that way. But we've also seen pop-ups come in terms of that curation. So when we think about face-to-face book selling, what we're really talking about there is very in-depth personal knowledge of your customers and curating the collections to suit that environment, whether it be a small town bookshop that is looking to support school children and the gift market, all the way through to a larger organization, or indeed an academically focused organization. Regardless, the principles are the same. You need to get to your audience, to your consumers, and show your curational skills and provide a service that is good enough in terms of delivering to their home environment. There are other organizations outside England, but we specialize in being able to offer that to bookshops. So as a consumer, if I want to buy my book on nanotechnology or whatever it might be, maxillofacial surgery, whatever it is, I expect that book to arrive and my customer service to be commensurate with what I would see from a large organization. But we are seeing a trend towards wanting to buy local, if that's the thing, but also to be presented with a meaningful selection of titles. And I think that's where the independents can really start to score. If you know your group, your posse of who buys from you regularly, you know what works. There are plenty of discovery tools, and being able to say, I can get these titles to you in a decent period of time, whatever their expectation is. But furthermore, I'm going to showcase to you the titles that are meaningful to you. That is something that a face-to-face style bookseller is easily able to pivot to with some very basic tools in terms of how you showcase, how you manage your email lists, how you keep yourself present in the feeds of your loyal customers. And that customer loyalty means that they are unlikely to be price sensitive and more service oriented. And we are seeing that in terms of a lot of the data that we see. I'm really glad you brought up that sort of idea of the fact that local is actually
a bit of a winner right now. A lot of consumers are very interested in supporting local suppliers, and they see the advantages of all of that extra service that they would get from a local supplier. I also like the notion that you sort of mentioned there, that it doesn't have to be hyperly complicated. You can start small in your digital response here and build up. A lot of our booksellers might not even have a lot of that in place already, but they don't have to be big technical players in order to fulfill that demand. They don't have to sort of make that enormous jump and all of a sudden have an e-commerce shop where they're selling their books. They could actually start quite small.
They could. Many have e-commerce, and specifically in the US, we have a service called Aereo that is receiving a lot of attention. Anyone, anywhere can sell a book, so it can be a pop-up, you could be an influencer, it could be your authors. It's US-centric in terms of delivery of content and for US booksellers only. But at the same time, you could literally start and say, I am going to have an Instagram feed and a Pinterest page. And I'm going to upload the books that I'm interested in and put them there. And from there, just link to me and say, tell me the books you want, and I will order them. And then literally behind the scenes, go into the standard ordering system that is in the shop. I know many booksellers who are doing this. Of course, people are coming with platforms to enable you to do that. They tend not to be so focused on the STM, the professional market, but it's the same catalog, it's still available. So you don't have to suddenly spend a lot of money on a web interface. What you need to think about is, where are my customers? How am I going to engage with them? How will they pay? If they're not going to come physically, I will need some way in which to make that pay. But there are payment systems that work very easily. Shopify is a very well-known system. You can get a website up for $100, $150, use your own currency. You don't have to be running great algorithms, etc., because the algorithm is in the bookseller's head.
Yes.
Because you're not selling tea towels and computer book stands and I don't know, groceries. You're selling books.
Yes.
You have a catalog. And one of the reasons that when Amazon started, and they were built on the infrastructure of England, but the reason they could start with books is because books are really well organized. There are catalogs, there are ISBNs. We are a very well organized trade group with very slick supply chains. And so that should position a specialist bookseller to be able to sell. But it really is back to basics of, where are my customers? How do I engage with them? How do I keep engaged with them? And what am I going to offer them in the way of that service? If you can do that, you don't need to be running anything very, very smart, but you need to be persistent and to be using the data.
I think those are some very useful messages to get across to our customer base here. So Ruth, I want to thank you for all your insights today. Before we clock out, one quick question. Frankfurt's not taking place this year in its physical format. There will be a number of virtual events. You're normally very active in Frankfurt. What are you going to miss most about the fair?
Well, at least it wasn't my 30th visit, because if it had been that anniversary, that would have been a problem. It was going to be my 28th. So yes, I am very active. I'm not going to miss the sore feet and subsisting on ice cream during the day. That I'm not going to miss. I think that my health will be better. I'm going to miss the people. It's not the regular meetings that I could have. We can have business reviews, and those have been very effective, actually. I think it's leading us to think about Frankfurt in a different way. For us, it's an opportunity to meet with our customers that we cannot meet face to face. And that's often the only time we can meet them physically. They come from all over the world. And to get the relationship that is between the cracks, if you like, if it's the mortar in our business relationship. We can talk about the money, the supply, problem solving, but it's the what's happening next. So we can do it virtually this year, but for me, it's the running through the corridors, bumping into someone, being at an event and having that epiphany and the new idea and the creative idea that then starts to be something that drives our strategy. We're the poorer for it, but we are finding other routes around. And I think that For many organizations, they'll be feeling the same. But hopefully we'll be able to meet in Frankfurt next year. And I wonder if we'll be managing it in a different way, perhaps being more focused on new ideas and new opportunities, and relegating the let me go through the numbers and that conversation to something that can be done online beforehand. And that's personally, and that's not an Ingram strategy. That's how I'm starting to see it, to get the most out of that one-to-one, because I miss it so much.
As we all do. So we hope to see you in Frankfurt next year. Thank you so much again.
Lovely. Thank you, Fiona.
Bye-bye.
Bye.